A dying woman tells her son about her love story with his father and his grandfather. As Victoire joins her family in their manor, her husband Thomas offers to call the doctor. She declines since it won't help her cancer. Instead, she dismisses everyone except her eldest son, Oscar. Victoire asks him to take her to Pont du Lac to settle matters given her declining health. On their way the next day, they pass by an old general store where Victoire first met Oscar's grandfather. Years ago, the young Victoire arrived at that store with her father Remy. They chanced upon George, who just finished selling his business to Garceau. Inside, the clerk, Joe, asked why Victoire wasn't in school. Ignoring this, the woman carried stacks of wood to their carriage, only to drop some. George rushed to help her, commenting that they'd be neighbors soon since he bought his mother's farm. When she didn't react, he left while commenting that she was becoming prettier. This made her smile. In the present, Victoire and her son arrive in the woman's childhood home. She soon stops at a room and shares with Oscar that their shoe business started there. However, the first pair she made was created in secret in the barn using her father's tools. When the young Victoire arrived home from the store, her mother, Françoise, expressed her disappointment that she was expelled from school. The daughter defended that the convent was suffocating, so she got herself kicked out. Wanting to carve her own way of life, Victoire snuck into the barn late that evening to get her father's tools. In the morning, George's family arrived at the nearby farm. The man greeted Victoire as she passed, which his wife, Domiti, noticed. During the night, Victoire snuck into the barn again to craft her first pair of shoes. After she was done, she overheard George shaping horseshoes from his barn. Victoire then peeked into their window to see Domiti writing in her journal. Soon, George arrived and Victoire watched the couple's private time. This ended when Domiti had a coughing fit. The next day, Remy found Victoire's sketches of shoes. He smiled, which his daughter saw. Thinking he'd support her, she proudly announced that she had more designs. But her father commented that people need sturdy shoes, not fancy ones. She argued that they were for special occasions, but he insisted that she finish school instead since Mother Superior was giving her a second chance. However, Victoire scorned him for not respecting her choice and ran off. The woman escaped into the woods but stumbled to the ground. When she got up, she saw a horse before her, so she caressed its mane. George soon arrived on horseback to retrieve the escaped horse. He noticed that the horse was calm around her, so he let her rein it. At his house, Domiti saw them approaching, so she hid her journal and went to her art room. When the two arrived, George introduced Victoire to his wife, who was drawing their sons. Domiti wondered why their guest wasn't in school, so Victoire replied that she wanted to open a shoe shop. The wife thought the idea wasn't meant for women, which their guest disagreed on. The next morning, Victoire and her parents attended an auction house. The woman used this chance to sell the shoes she made, shocking her parents. Among the crowd, George suggested buying it for Domiti, but she declined. Despite the auctioneer's efforts, nobody bid it since a woman made it, so Victoire grabbed the shoes and stormed off. On her way home, George's son, Thomas, approached and complimented her shoes, adding that his father thought she was brave and talented. His family soon caught up with them, so George offered to buy the shoes, thinking he could turn a profit by selling it to his uncle's shop. Convinced, the woman gave him the shoes, but denied payment until he sold it. Adding to her fortune, Victoire soon arrived home and discovered that her parents had set up a workbench for her to make her shoes. Remy acknowledged Victoire's stubbornness, but refused to have men laugh at his daughter's work. With that, the woman gained her parents' support, so Victoire hugged her father. After some time, George visited Victoire with Thomas and Ferdinand. He gave her the money he owed for the shoes and informed her that his uncle was willing to display more of her shoes. Soon, however, Domiti's health continued to deteriorate, so George sent their sons to their aunt while he focused on her. One day, Victoire visited to deliver meals her mother made for the couple but overheard the two arguing. Domiti suspected that her husband was interested in Victoire, so she demanded to return to their old home, away from the woman. However, George insisted that she can't travel in her state. He also assured her of his love, but her lack of a reply made him walk away. He saw Victoire on her way out. Given his wife's distrust of him, he told her that they couldn't count on his uncle's shop anymore. Victoire quietly accepted this and left. By autumn, Domiti passed away and George found her journal. After reading it, he placed it in a box in the barn. He then made arrangements as he planned to move away for a few months to have a change of scenery. This saddened Victoire, so she distracted herself by making shoes while he was away. One night, her father suggested selling her works, so Victoire presented her boots in a shop the following day. One of the customers jabbed that women weren't strong enough to make good boots, so Victoire challenged him to rip the sole off. The man tried but failed. Triumphant, she gloated about the way she made it, yet the men still refused to buy them. Not willing to give up, she gave the shoes to the shop owner, who promised that he'll spread the word if he liked them. That stormy night, Victoire found George's barn on fire. She ran inside and helped an injured Joe out. She then rushed back in to help the horses, with her father joining her. The next morning, Victoire explored the wreckage and found the box with Domitie's journal. From it, she learned that Domitie felt guilty about imprisoning her husband with her short-lived love, so she allowed him to love Victoire after her passing. Just then, George arrived, so Victoire hid the journal. The man thanked her for saving the horses and confessed that he thought of her while he was gone. He moved closer to appreciate her, but she pulled back, thinking this was wrong. With that, the man mentioned that his uncle wanted all the shoes she could provide before leaving. The next day, while Remy left to deliver his daughter's shoes to the store, Victoire headed to George's ranch. She watched him wrangle the horses, still conflicted about accepting his feelings. Francois soon found her and comforted her, understanding her daughter's plight. Eventually, Victoire decided to approach him and gave him Domitie's journal, revealing that she read it. George downplayed that his late wife was sick when she wrote it, and it warped her thoughts. Regardless, Victoire confessed her feelings for him, prompting George to gently kiss her. However, the woman suggested that they keep their relationship a secret for now. In the present, Oscar is surprised to hear about her relationship with George, his grandfather. Victoire merely asks him not to tell their father. Their secret love lasted for years. One day, George took Victoire to a cabin to celebrate her birthday. There, she gave him a bag, which contained 2 rings. Victoire declared that she wanted to go public with their relationship by getting married. George expressed his desire to marry her, but he revealed that Ferdinand was sick, so he couldn't tell him the news now. Later that night, George visited an older Ferdinand in his bed. When his son asked where he'd been, the father lied that he had dinner with a friend. Still, Ferdinand figured that it was with Victoire. Ferdinand refused to have his mother replaced, but George argued that he respected Domitie and didn't do anything wrong with Victoire. Still, his son turned away from him, disappointed. Because of this, Victoire soon felt a growing rift between her and her lover. One day, Remy hauled a sack to their carriage, but his back gave out. Fortunately, Thomas arrived and helped him. The man even presented Victoire a new leather cutter as a present for her recent birthday. Later, Thomas returned home and told his father that he found work from Garceau. George advised him to be wary since Garceau recently fired a loyal employee. Their conversation was interrupted when Victoire arrived with food from her mother. As she served the meal, Ferdinand approached and sarcastically praised the smell. He also commented that she delivered food when his mother was sick and that Victoire was sitting on their mother's chair. The woman offered to move, but George insisted that the chair wasn't important. One night, a doctor and a priest visited Ferdinand after the man suffered a bad episode. George, Victoire, and Remy waited anxiously in the dining room until Thomas arrived. The priest soon left, saying he couldn't give the Eucharist because Ferdinand couldn't swallow. This made his family worry further. Later that night, George cared for his son and offered him anything he wanted to encourage him to keep fighting. With this, Ferdinand whispered his wishes, which led to George breaking up with Victoire the next day. That evening, Victoire sat broken on their porch, unaware of Thomas watching her with desire. His father caught him, and instead of confronting his son, he walked away. Days later, Thomas shared with his coworker, Ovid, about his interest in Victoire. His coworker commented that she was old for him, but advised that he just kiss her to know her feelings. After some time, Victoire hung carpets while she watched the brothers walk with their father. Soon, Ferdinand grew tired, so they placed him in a wheelchair. To Victoire, however, Ferdinand was pretending to recover to keep her away. The next day, Thomas arrived late at the general store, only for Garceau to notice that the business was up since he started working there. With this, he wanted Thomas to handle the shop. Motivated, Thomas rushed out to complete his deliveries with Ovid. While they transported lumber on a carriage, a gunshot rang and spooked the horses. This caused their car to crash, hurting Thomas and Ovid. Later, a wounded Thomas arrived at Victoire's home, so she quickly led him inside to treat his wounds. As she did, Thomas kissed her, saying he loved her since he was young. Seeing no resistance, he kissed her deeper. George soon talked to them separately about their relationship. He asked Victoire if this was to get back at him, but she reasoned that her love was serious and she won't lose it again. As with Thomas, the man believed he could start a family since he was going to be promoted. Months later, Thomas and Victoire got married using the ring she gave George back then. In the present, Victoire admits to Oscar how she loved George but was eager to start a family with Thomas. Her son asks why she went to this house with him, and she replies that it was to confess her burdens before she passes. Oscar assures her that her family loves her regardless of her past. The next morning before breakfast, the old Victoire wants to continue her story, but Oscar heads upstairs to arrange her luggage for the trip later, ignoring her plea to speak. With this, she recalls when she already had Oscar and was pregnant. She found the young Oscar in Domitie's old art room where Ferdinand was also present, sarcastically commenting how their home was now hers too. Victoire ignored this but suddenly went into labor. Ferdinand rushed to call for help, but she revealed that everyone was in the village, so she only had Ferdinand to help her. She successfully gave birth to her daughter in the art room, and the process left Ferdinand emotional. Meanwhile, Thomas was in the general store, but Garçou called him to talk. He told him that his son's sawmill caught fire, so he had bad news for Thomas. Later that night, the family had dinner and George poured wine to celebrate his granddaughter's birth, along with his horse winning the regionals and Ferdinand returning to school. Thomas, however, shared that he lost his job because Garçou had to hire his son to support his family. He also commented that this kind of support was absent in their family. George took offense, but Thomas added that if he hadn't sold the shop to Garçou, they wouldn't be in this situation. Ferdinand defended that their father did it for their mother. Disregarding this, Thomas then announced that he would be a traveling flower salesman in 2 months. Victoire protested since he'd be gone for long periods while she had their kids and a shop to look after. Her husband coldly replied that George could look after her. Soon, Thomas was away and George helped look after Victoire's children, pushing the two closer again. As the woman helped George care for his sick horse, she appreciated how dependable her father-in-law was. That night, George poured hot water for Victoire's bath, but his daughter-in-law shed her clothes before him. She searched his eyes for any spark, but the man just left. After this, they avoided each other until Thomas returned from his work one morning. He woke his wife to show her his earnings, but instead, the woman grabbed his hand, wordlessly asking for passion. Thomas rejected her advances since he was scheduled to meet another client. This left her dejected, which George soon noticed after his son left. Sympathizing with her, the man finally took her and fulfilled her needs. That night, while Victoire made shoes, Thomas arrived and amorously approached her, apologizing while expressing his longing for her, unaware of her tryst with his father. As for George, the man fled into his cabin for months out of guilt. In the present, Oscar is disgusted by this revelation, so he leaves his mother to her thoughts. Years ago, Victoire's shoes won a competition in France, but Thomas placed his name on her work without telling her. Her husband argued that the French looked down on female laborers, defending how his action opened up international demand for her shoes. Making matters worse, Thomas announced that he was leaving again and would miss Oscar's birthday. As he packed his things, Victoire confronted him about his constant travels. He admitted that he was sick of this place and wished to move. He then revealed that he was leaving to see his brother, who eloped with a woman. On Oscar's birthday, he wondered if his father had forgotten about him, hence why he wasn't around. To comfort him, George assured the kid that his father had a gift for him. Outside, they showed Oscar a colt, saying that it was from Thomas. This delighted the child. Elsewhere, Thomas met Ferdinand's wife, Georgina, and their daughter. However, his brother's illness had worsened. The pale man was happy to see his brother, but asked forgiveness for making their father suffer. Meanwhile, Victoire and George were alone, allowing the woman to ask why she still felt passion for him. George just walked away, saying he'll go to bed. Unable to stifle that passion, Victoire raced after George and began another tryst with him. In the present, the aged Victoire began writing her most painful secrets. She recalled when Thomas told his father that they were moving to a city to start a shoe factory. He invited his father to join them, but he declined. Later on, George told Victoire in private that it was time he let her live with her husband since they have 4 of Thomas' children to raise. Victoire corrected him, saying Marries, her second youngest, was his. The revelation later caused George to have a heart attack. Victoire went to him with Marries, urging him to hang on for them, but he fainted. In the morning, she and Thomas waited until the man awoke. When he did, George embraced Victoire and confessed about their time in the woods, prompting Thomas to walk away. The wife later approached her husband, who finally told her about the time George caught him spying on her. From how his father looked at him, Thomas figured out his relationship with her. Still, he pursued Victoire and did all the work to deserve her. What only mattered to him was if she loved him. Tearfully, Victoire embraced him in response, and this was enough for Thomas. In the present, Victoire finishes her letter. She then waits in the living room, guilty that Oscar has to know her secrets because only the truth can set her free. Soon, her life comes to an end. Later, Oscar reads the letter where Victoire instructed him to carry her secret until he can tell Marries the truth and give him peace. Soon, Marries arrives, envious that Oscar was with their mother when she passed. He tells Oscar that on the last dinner they shared, she called him special and asked him to care for his siblings. Unable to explain why, Oscar just tells him to go to their father since he needs them right now. After Marries leaves, his brother takes Victoire's letter and tries to burn it to hide her secret. However, he hesitates and locks it inside his desk instead. He leaves his mother's secrets for now and joins his half-brother and uncle to be with his father.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.